Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing Episode 67, Showdown at the Pokécoral. The episode begins with Ash participating in the Pokemon League. What? Already? No more filler episodes? Okay then, we see the crowd, and they're all immensely cheering for Ash as he sends out his first Pokemon, or at least he tries to. But then, his Pokeball suddenly comes out of his hand, and it grows huge, and immediately flies back at him, as opposed to sending out a Pokemon. It then tries to suck him in like a vacuum. Oh wait, Ash was just fucking dreaming this. And the reason why the Pokeball tried to suck him in like a vacuum was because his mom's Mr. Mime was vacuuming his room along with Ash's face. Ash then goes down from his bedroom and finds his mom tending to some flowers, and he angrily sits down at the table, informing her that Mr. Mime literally tried to suck its face off. But Ash's mom just defends Mr. Mime, stating that it only cleaned what was dirty, insinuating that Ash was dirty. This led Misty to accuse Ash of being as dirty as a Discord mod and not taking any showers, as Pikachu and Togepi ate their breakfast. Ash got pissed off at Misty's comment, and only half-jokingly tells the Mr. Mime to fucking clean Misty's bad attitude. Ash's mom then reveals that Mr. Mime would only listen to her, so good luck with Ash trying to do that. Damn, why are you so against your son, Miss Ketchum? Brock then states, hey guys, maybe fucking quit arguing and hurry up and eat breakfast already, because the entire point why we're in Pallet Town is for you to see Professor Oak so you can ask him about the Pokemon League, so let's hurry up with that. While Brock was saying this, he was simultaneously helping Mr. Mime cook, so to be honest, he probably just wanted Ash to fucking test his food already. Meanwhile, Team Rocket were on their way back to their HQ in order to regretfully inform Giovanni that they had failed to capture him any Pokemon so far, even after being given the temporary honor of being the gym leaders of the Viridian Gym. They were obviously very scared to see what he would say, and was only doing this because it was a mandated meeting, so they were very close to just being like, you know what, fuck it, we quit, we don't want to get killed by Giovanni as punishment or anything. But then, they immediately turned back when they spotted the entire fucking HQ in the distance explode. Not only that, but then, Giovanni's evil powerful Pokemon comes out and flies up into the air at Mach 80 speed, with all of its armor that it was wearing shedding off. Giovanni had survived the explosion along with his Persian, and Jesse and James immediately run to him to ask what happened, and they overhear him cursing the Pokemon, heavily implying that it did something bad and was the source of the explosion. Giovanni then spots Jesse and James and angrily questions what the fuck they were doing there, leading James to try and remind him about the meeting that he had called, but it appears that Giovanni had forgotten about the meeting due to the whole chaos of the event, so he simply just gets on a helicopter, which had swiftly arrived for him in Persian, and he's like, yo, Jesse, James, I don't care, I don't know what the fuck you guys are doing here, but I don't want to see you right now, just do your fucking jobs, and essentially, he doesn't let them quit, and he just leaves. Team Rocket are overjoyed at this, thinking that Giovanni genuinely had, like, some super appreciation for them, and that's why he wasn't getting mad at them, but it was really just because he forgot to get mad at them. But regardless, this gives them renewed determination to continue on their quest to catch Ash's Pikachu, or any other rare Pokemon for that matter. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, they had finally arrived at Professor Oak's laboratory, and as soon as they did, the first thing that Oak spotted was Togepi, in amazement of the Pokemon that was just recently added to the Pokedex. Oak then informs Ash that Gary was here, and takes him into another room where Gary was sitting drinking tea. Now, despite the whole Viridian Gym episode where Gary seemed to have a redemption arc, it seems that that is now kind of gone. Gary's gotten over the whole loss thing now, and he's back to being as egotistical a prick as ever. Him and Ash obviously proceed to argue, especially when Ash reveals that he did in fact have his eighth badge, with Gary reacting in shock like, damn, I'm surprised you actually managed to get the 8 badges, you fucking prick. With Oak probably knowing that the audience has heard all of this same bullshit argument like 10,000 times before, he then tells Ash and Brock to both shut the fuck up, informing them that, with them currently being the top 2 trainers in all of Pallet Town, they should be setting a better example, as opposed to just arguing all the time. Gary and Ash are both immensely shocked hearing that they were the top 2 trainers in Pallet Town, as they remember the other 2 trainers that left with starters at the same time as them. Oak reveals, though, that these 2 trainers were actually weak bastards, and had since given up on their journey, since they were too weak. The conversation is then interrupted by Ash's Krabby coming in. That's right, Krabby actually gets some screen time for once, even though it's like never even had an on-screen battle. It comes in and gives Ash and the gang some snacks, and Ash remarks that he was happy to see it. Are you really happy to see it, though? You never even gave it a chance to do anything. Anyways, Oak then continues that instead of Ash and Gary arguing, they should just be focusing on their own immense accomplishments, stating that they should be proud of themselves for actually managing to do some shit, unlike the other Kanto trainers, referencing the fact that they had actually been able to acquire the 8 badges necessary for the Pokemon League. Misty hears all this constant fucking gloating that Professor Oak was doing to Ash and Gary, and she doesn't want it to get into Ash's head, so she reminds him that his Pokemon played just as big a role, if not more so, in all of his accomplishments than he himself did. This doesn't piss Ash off, though, as he even admits that Misty was kinda right. Yay, let's go, character growth. Gary then questions both Ash and Oak if they know where the Pokemon League was going to be located, revealing that he didn't know either. Ash then remembers the entire reason why he came back to Pallet Town in the first place, which was to ask Professor Oak where the Pokemon League was even located. He expected Gary to know, though, and was shocked that he was in the same boat as him. Man, it reveals that the Pokemon League must not really communicate well. Like, how did, like, okay, Ash is always incompetent, but how did Gary not know where the league was located? Like, that'd be like if you were, like, a pro football player, and you didn't know, where the most famous football stadium was, or some shit. Apparently, the league at least tells some people what's going on, though, as Gary and Ash both question Oak where the fuck the Pokemon League was, and he reveals that it was at a place called the Indigo Plateau, and that there was 200 trainers that were going to compete. Damn, that's actually quite a few. He then reveals that it wasn't going to be happening for another 2 months though, and suggests that Ash and Gary use the extra time to get some extra training in. Gary only responds by taunting Ash as usual, saying that no matter how much training he did, he would never be able to beat him. Damn though, 2 months till the Pokemon League, looks like we still have a lot of filler episodes ahead of us. Meanwhile, back at Ash's house, the doorbell rang, leading Ash's mom to go answer it and find none other than Team Rocket on the other side, who want to steal Pikachu. They obviously don't reveal this though, as they are in disguises as news reporters. They state that instead of wanting to steal Pikachu, they actually wanted to interview Ash for the Pokemon League, claiming that they were representing a show called Pokemon Masters of Tomorrow. But Ash was definitely not going to be a Pokemon Master tomorrow, especially if the Pokemon League was in 2 months, guys. Anyways, Team Rocket's lie is then immediately cut off by Mr. Mime, who sweeps Jesse and James off of their feet while doing its cleaning. For some reason, it was cleaning outside as well. It was now so obsessed with cleaning the house and doing all the chores that it was even going outside of the house. And Team Rocket was caught in its cleaning rampage, being dragged away. Fortunately for them, though, as they were dragged away, Ash's mom said goodbye to them and revealed that Ash was currently at Professor Oak's lab. This gave them what they were hoping for with this whole news trick, which was to get Ash's mom to reveal Ash's location so they could go steal Pikachu, and she had done just that. They thank her as Mr. Mime still pulls them away. Meanwhile, back at Oak's lab, Krabby had returned yet again with more food for Ash and the gang in Oak. They happily take the food, and Gary then asks Ash if he was happy with his Krabby being a mere fucking Krabby. Ash asks Gary what he means by this, as Gary brings out his Krabby that he had caught before, as Oak had said, and reveals that it was now a huge-ass fucking Kingler. Just kidding, I thought it was a Kingler because it was so big, but no, it's actually just a Krabby that is super big for some reason. Gary insists that the reason why his Krabby was so big was because it had gained so much experience. But bro, if it gained that much experience, it would have evolved into a fucking Kingler by now. Despite this, Gary doesn't stop his taunting, as he taunts Ash that a trainer like him could never raise his Krabby to the degree that Gary has raised his, as he never switches out his Pokemon. Basically, he was making fun of the fact that Ash had left Krabby at the lab for all this fucking time, instead of switching out one of his other Pokemon for it, and training them simultaneously. As he states that that's the only way that you can truly get strong, is if you have multiple different options for Pokemon to use. Ash just cannot stop catching strays at this point, not even just by Gary, as Brock and Misty proceed to agree with Gary's point that Ash should be switching out his Pokemon from the PC more often. Brock and Misty do eventually feel bad for contributing to Ash getting dunked on, though, so when Gary proceeds to dunk on Ash for apparently not knowing anything about type matchups either, they ask him what Pokemon he would use against theirs, thinking that Gary probably didn't know type matchups either. But Gary proves them wrong, as when Brock asks what Pokemon he would use against his rock types, Gary responds with either a water or grass type, the correct answer. Ash then comments how he managed to beat Brock with a Pikachu, which only makes Gary laugh, as his point was now proven that Ash clearly didn't understand type matchups, as Electric didn't beat Rock. The argument between Ash and Gary was getting pretty fucking intense at this point, to the point where Brock asked Professor Oak to do something about it and fucking stop these two lunatics, but Oak denied, claiming that he was a professor, not a referee, simply proceeding to eat all of the food that Krabby had brought him. This allows the argument to transition to yet another topic, being the amount of Pokemon that Ash and Gary had. Gary doubts that Ash had more than him, and Ash rebuttals, claiming that he would have more than Gary. At their request, Oak then scans their Pokedexes so that we can prove which one actually has caught more Pokemon, and the Pokedexes being scanned reveals that Ash has seen 100 Pokemon, while Gary has only seen 60. This initially leads Ash to celebrate, having seemingly finally beaten Gary at something, but Professor Oak then reveals that while Gary had seen less individual species of Pokemon, Gary had actually caught more Pokemon overall, since he had caught duplicates. Ash questions why Gary would capture multiple of the same Pokemon, and Gary simply demands that they go see all the Pokemon that he caught, and he would explain then. This leads Oak to accept Gary's request and bring them all to his Pokeball storage room, where he kept all of the Pokemon that the trainers from Pallet Town sent him. Oak showed both Ash and Gary their respective shelves, with Gary's shelf having over 200 fucking Pokemon on it, despite him only seeing 100, so that implies that he caught like fucking 2 of each Pokemon. Ash once again questions this, with both Gary and Oak responding by pointing out that Ash had caught duplicates of Pokemon as well, being his Tauros, which he caught 30 of back in the Safari Zone. This leads Gary to then state the reason why he caught so many duplicates of Pokemon, being simply that the more Pokemon you had, the higher chance you had of winning, so you should just throw your Pokeballs indiscriminately and capture everything you see. Ash rebuttals with his point of view, being that you shouldn't catch duplicates of Pokemon, as it essentially cheapens them and turns them into nothing but tools for battle, as opposed to if you only catch one of the Pokemon, then you'll grow closer to it and become friends, and if you became friends, then you achieved a bond, which gave you plot armor, yay! He then clarifies that even though he caught 30 Tauros, he still viewed each of them as their own Pokemon. And that was the important thing. Ash and Gary both adamantly argue their points of view, but Professor Oak then cuts him off, stating that Gary and Oak were clearly different trainers with different styles, and that was okay. You could get somewhere in the Pokemon world with both Ash's philosophy of viewing your Pokemon as friends and Gary's philosophy as viewing them as training tools, so long as you didn't abuse your Pokemon either way and treated them with respect, like you would a human. Now, I don't know, I initially disagreed with Oak's philosophy here, as having multiple Pokemon of the same species, it's definitely going to take down your appreciation of each one, because they're not unique anymore. But, I don't know, maybe not. I mean, you can still treat each of the Pokemon as their own. I guess Ash did with the Tauros. Meanwhile, Team Rocket had been walking for a while, as they were trying to find Professor Oak's research lab, where Ash's mom had told them that Ash was. They were getting so frustrated walking that Jesse kicked a pebble right into a tree. Unfortunately for Team Rocket, this caused several Kakuna to come out of the tree and immediately evolve into Beedrill, which started chasing them. To make matters even worse, they weren't watching where they were going when they were running, as they were too busy looking back at the Beedrill, so they ran into a Snorlax that was sleeping, bouncing off its huge-ass belly. With no way forward, this meant that the Beedrill could catch up to them and attack them with full force, much to Team Rocket's dismay, as they could only stare at the Beedrill in horror. Meanwhile, back at the Pokemon lab, with Ash and Gary's argument finally put to rest, Oak then decides to explain his average day in hopes that it would teach Ash and Gary even more about Pokemon in preparation for the league. The first thing that he does is use a machine to check on all the Pokemon's vitals to make sure that they weren't dying or nothing, and then he decides to go to all the individual Pokemon's habitats and let some of them out for some fresh air and feed them. To help with his explanation, he goes and shows Ash and the gang several of the Pokemon habitats, such as Pidgeys, Ponytas, Mankeys, Spearows, Staryus, indicating that Oak basically owned like fucking 10,000 acres of land if he had to fit all these Pokemon in all these unique areas. Oak then continues on with his routine, stating that after all the Pokemon were taken care of, with the exception of feeding them dinner and returning them to their Pokeballs if they requested, that's when he prioritizes his research, adding that his current research right now was studying individual Pokemon of the same species, such as the minor differences between two Rattata. Oak then reveals his main reason for wanting to build all these individual Pokemon habitats as opposed to just having a lab was because it would give him a better way to understand Pokemon and all their individual differences, which was heavily related to what he was studying. He then further states that because of all of this research that he was doing, he had made a discovery, which was that the main thing that differentiated Pokemon of the same species from each other was dependent on the personality of the trainer, stating that if a trainer was rude, for example, then the Pokemon was rude. If the trainer was nice, the Pokemon was nice. This was why Oak was so hellbent on having trainers make sure that they treated their Pokemon with respect and like they were humans, as each Pokemon had a human-like personality of its own. Oak's huge-ass exposition dump gets Brock excited, as he takes it to mean that since his Vulpix showed him so much affection and loved him, it meant that Vulpix's original trainer, Susie, the breeder that he had a crush on, must like him as well. This leads Brock to happily daydream about ending up with Susie, leading Ash and the gang along with Gary to stare at him in disappointment, asking, "What the fuck is wrong with you, Brock?" But I mean, I think Brock had a fair point, to be honest. Maybe they were just jealous of his simping. I would have been at this point. As Oak is doing this long-ass exposition dump, one of Gary's Pokemon that he kept at the lab, being a Doduo, comes up and greets him, and is very kind, which kind of goes against Oak's whole point here, because Gary is far from very kind. But anyways, this leads Professor Oak to reveal that the reason why Doduo was so kind was because it hadn't adapted Gary's personality, because it wasn't close with Gary. The Pokemon only adapted the personalities of trainers that they were close with. Oak uses Ash's Muck and Kingler as further evidence, stating that since Ash hadn't spent really any time with either of them, but they had spent a lot of time with Professor Oak, they would be more likely to exhibit Oak's personality as opposed to Ash's. As if on cue, Muck then shows up and absolutely bulldozes Oak, trying to hug it, signifying its attachment to it. Whoa, no way, Muck actually got some screen time. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had recovered from the Beedrill attack and were resuming their trek to get to Professor Oak's lab, now having to climb up rocks to do so. They were all even more tired at this point, and oh boy they must have been, as Jessie mistakes an actual rock for a Geodude when she puts her hand on it to try and climb up it. The Geodude doesn't get pissed off though, it actually blushes, signifying it was attracted to Jessie, but unfortunately for the Geodude, Jessie slaps the Geodude away, utterly rejecting it. Thankfully, because we don't want any fucking Pokemon-human relationships. In the process of hitting away Geodude though, she then hits a Sandshrew, and the Sandshrew doesn't blush, no, it's actually angry, and it proceeds to scratch Jessie in the face and kick her. This causes Jessie to cry in pain, and this crying obviously annoys an Onix, as an Onix then rises up from underground and proceeds to chase Team Rocket away. Holy fuck, they had bad luck, one after the other, holy shit. Meanwhile, back at the lab, Professor Oak had finally finished his long-ass exposition, and had decided to show Ash and the gang more of the Pokemon habitats like he did a bit earlier. He shows them a lot of habitats, but the main one that he shows them is the water Pokemon habitat, which catches Misty's amazement especially. I'm sure you know why. Due to Ash seeing all these various habitats and all the numerous Pokemon inside them, it led him to believe that Oak must have all the fucking Pokemon in the world. I mean, this was more Pokemon than he had ever seen. Oak denies this, obviously, stating that not only were there Pokemon that he didn't have that were known, there were also probably Pokemon that no one even knew existed. Brock then supports Oak's claim by reminding Ash of Togepi. It was only recently discovered in the Pokedex. Ash then realizes that Oak and Brock were right, as he remembers the very beginning of his journey, when he saw that mysterious Pokemon fly over the rainbow, being a Ho-Oh, he just didn't know it yet, that the Pokedex couldn't identify. Being fueled by this memory, this makes Ash more determined than ever to want to catch a whole bunch of new Pokemon, in hopes that maybe he would even find one that was undiscovered. Gary agrees with Ash's sentiment for once, stating that he wanted to do the same. Ash and Gary nod at each other in agreement, and this causes Misty and Brock to wonder if maybe Ash and Gary could get along after all. However, their rare agreement didn't make them friends, no. It made them now more intense rivals, as Gary requested a battle with Ash to test his strength, stating it could determine which one of them would be able to accomplish the goal of catching more Pokemon and finding a new species first. Ash eagerly accepts Gary's battle request, having wanted to show him up since the fucking day they met, but unfortunately, they're unable to begin their battle, as an explosion is then heard, coming from the electric Pokemon Preserve on Oak's lab. Ash and the gang, along with Gary and Oak, then go to the Electric Pokemon Preserve to investigate what had caused the explosion, where it's revealed that it was caused by a whole bunch of Voltorb and Electrode, who had exploded due to being scared by Jesse and James, who had arrived in their territory. That's right, Team Rocket had somehow avoided the Onix and finally made their way to the Pokemon Lab, only to be utterly decimated by the Voltorb and Electrode, their beaten bodies still laying in the crater. However, they were swiftly able to get back up. Dude, I don't know how they managed to keep surviving all this shit. And demanded that after all this time searching for the lab, all they fucking wanted was Pikachu. Meowth was the main one who was doing the talking, much to Professor Oak and Gary's shock, who had never heard of a talking Meowth before. Oak is so fascinated by Meowth that he forgets Team Rocket's imminent threat, and instead just asks the Meowth to talk some more so he can study him. Meowth loves the attention, so he instructs Jesse and James to say the motto with him, as Meowth definitely talked a lot during that. Jesse and James initially agree as they start doing the motto, but Jesse and James then stop as they realize that Oak was only interested in what Meowth was saying and wasn't paying attention to them, which pissed them off, so they decided to beat Meowth up a little bit as revenge for him stealing the spotlight. With Team Rocket distracted, Ash and Gary see the perfect opportunity to attack Team Rocket, challenging them to a fight. When suddenly, some Tauros show up and do the work for them, stampeding through a fence and blasting Team Rocket off in the process. Brock and Misty sarcastically wave goodbye to Team Rocket as they laugh at their unfortune, and Oak then reveals that all of those Tauros that attacked Team Rocket were actually Ash's. This causes Ash to thank his Tauros as he saw them still stampeding in the distance for saving the day, despite the fact that Ash hadn't shown them any attention previously. Maybe they did somehow adopt Ash's personality despite never even being around him, as that's something Ash would do, help out people he didn't know. Gary then decides to postpone his and Ash's battle, stating that they should save something more climactic for the Pokemon League. Ash agrees, noting how it would be a way better stage, and Gary then heads off. This leads Ash to remark how he really needs to start training for the Pokemon League now, knowing he might have to face Gary, asking Brock and Misty to help him, stating it would be a good friendship-building exercise for them as well. Oak then interrupts, though, and says he has a better idea for a friendship-building exercise, fixing the fence that the Ash's Tauros broke, stating Ash was technically responsible since the Tauros were his Pokemon. Ash and the gang obviously complain at having to do slave labor, but remark that they might as well, as there was still 2 months before the Pokemon League, aka still plenty of filler episodes to get some training in.